Obviously, I think we've all sort of heard about generative AI now the last year or so. It's either Armageddon or it's nothing to worry about, right? So everybody's sort of looking for what we can do with it. Is it really going to change the way we work, or is it just a lot of noise about nothing, right? So let's take a look at that. But before we start, maybe I'll take a couple of minutes to introduce myself. My name is Ashwin Rao. I've now been in the Oracle ecosystem for about 21 years. Originally started in e-business suite, did on-prem WMS, then eventually moved to OTM and then cloud WMS. I manage delivery for Accenture in the logistics space from our delivery center in India, right? Now, I guess the question comes is, why do we need, Gen AI, right? What's it all about? There's obviously a need. So there's two parts to it. One is augmentation, the other is automation, right? So that's why you'll see this is a survey that we had, conducted specifically in the supply chain space, wherein there are opportunities for augmentation and there is opportunities for automation. And probably over the last maybe 6 months or so, you'll also see the word agentic AI being used a lot, which is essentially not just give you a recommendation, but also implement the recommendation, right? So that's what this is all about. And there are opportunities. And one interesting thing that you will see, and it probably also reflects in where the maturity of solutions around generative AI are, there's a lot of opportunities in the areas of procurement, freight pricing, those kind of areas, freight quotes, and that also reflects in sort of the small use case that we're going to see, right? But I'm sure maybe quick poll, right? How many of you have used generative AI for anything, right? ChatGPT, pretty much, right? And I'll just give you a small example of my introduction to ChatGPT. So it came out. I said, great, let's take a look at it. Tried logging in with my email ID. It says this email ID is already being used. That was a bit surprising. I said, so maybe it's a mistake. Let me just try resetting my password. Logged in, and on the left-hand side, as you see in ChatGPT, right, you can see what all has been queried. I see my 12-year-old has been using it to do his homework. So I said, well, you use my email ID. He said, yeah, because I don't have an email ID, right? So, and of course, kids are pretty sharp. So not only was he using it for homework, he was also asking it to summarize it so that it fit in the number of words that he needed to submit his paper in. So obviously, people are using it before we've even started, right? So that's just a small sort of introduction. I'm sure many of us have similar use cases, right? So when we talk about generative AI, and the example that I'm going to use typically is LSP sales, quotations, pricing, order creation, those kind of areas, because that's where sort of we heard that there's probably a lot of email traffic, unstructured email traffic, right? And not just email, it could be chat. We saw an example wherein all the content of the message was a number with 3 question marks, right? And somebody is supposed to decipher that, provide a response, and they're doing that manually today. So on an average, the sample that we were looking at, they receive about 1,000 such requests in a day. And they all have to be processed completely manually, right? And I guess the first sort of question that we always come up with is, and when we're looking at use cases, is the first question that we need to ask ourselves internally, is this really a generative AI use case? Is it just simple automation? Is it, just robotic process automation, right? Those are your typical choices. And the why, and why we have done sort of some RPA in other areas of OTM where it does not work is some emails may say, just give me a quote. Some emails may say, give you a lot of detail. Some emails may not have enough information. So you cannot use any sort of bots or robots to decipher that because the information is inherently unstructured. Right. So that's part of the challenge of, and that's what we are trying to solve as the use cases around generative AI. And also different sources, right? So we are getting even requests over, Microsoft Chat, WhatsApp, anything else, and everything else, right? So how do we streamline this? So we essentially are using the platform to contextualize the data that's in the note, whatever the source of it, right? For purpose of simplicity, maybe let's take email, right? Read that, and for those of us who are familiar, there is this whole concept of prompt engineering, right? So you only get out of the platform as good an output depending on how good are the questions that you ask it. That's the whole concept of working with generative AI, wherein the output is only as good as the questions that you ask it, right? So you've got to read the entire data set, you've got to analyze it, and you've got to provide a response. So the example that we're looking at is probably more agentic in the sense that we're receiving the information, we're analyzing it, processing it, and also sending it back. So we're not just using it as an example of augmentation, but automation as well, right? So we assist with the manual tasks and of course improve the performance, because we're looking at essentially somebody who might be spending maybe 3 to 4 hours responding to such emails. Now it all sort of happens in a matter of minutes. So from an architecture perspective, and you can just ignore a lot of this. So this is sort of where that the data processor piece is where a lot of the work that typically goes on, wherein this is where we're asking the question, right? So if we are getting a response, a request, we're asking as the request goes into the LLM, we ask what kind of an email this is, right? Is this a request? Is this a response? Or is it just somebody wants an order created, somebody just wants a code? And what we use with that information is then we call the right API, right? Now, it may be to create an order release, it may be provide me a code. But what's also important, what we've done is we've also added an additional layer of validation. So somebody sends us a request, but there's not enough information on it. We are able to analyze that as well and send it back saying, look, we can't create your order, we can't respond to your request because certain information is unavailable, right? We're also able to go to the extent to say what information is unavailable, right? So it's only, and when you start sort of thinking about it, the amount of use cases that you can come up with is indefinite, right? Because we all sort of deal with it from various angles, from the customers, from an SI perspective. So we have enough opportunities out there. And sort of every time we come up with a use case, of course, the first question always is this really a use case for generative AI? Once you get a use case, how deep can you go? So those are the sort of kind of questions we have to ask ourselves. But in the end, whatever solution that we come up with, a lot of the work typically will go in this data processor, because understanding context is typically what an LLM is extremely good at, right? So whenever we interact, ChatGPT can tell you tone of a message. It can ask you whether it's a question, whether it's not a question. So all of that works pretty seamlessly. In fact, we did nothing on the LLM. We didn't have to train it at all. It understands natural language pretty much by default, right? So only thing that we had to do from a work perspective is what are they really asking about, and is there enough information on that piece of information, right? So, I mean, it says demo, but it's really not. Anybody wants a demo, just reach out, and I'm happy to walk you through. But essentially, we're looking at 3 different use cases, right? One is typically a pickup request, wherein we need to create an order within OTM. So we say, we receive the request, we validate all the information. If there's anything missing, we respond back with an email saying, this is the missing information. And we also say, if it was successful, we give them an order ID and we say, look, going forward, if you want any information, reach our customer service desk with this order ID for information. Another simple case is pricing request inquiry. And I guess one question would be, why not sort of use RIQ, right? But the advantage here we have is not everybody is always going to log in, but we can also respond to different types of emails, maybe asking the same question. How I type out an email may be completely different from how somebody else types out an email, but we're asking the same thing, right? And that's where we sort of need to understand the context. The last piece, this is probably the simplest one, is essentially a status inquiry. Hey, where's my shipment kind of thing, right? So these are primarily just the 3 that we've started off with. Listening to Srini yesterday, we also were going down the path of trying to analyze a log file, because that's typically the most sort of commonly asked question from an end user perspective is, how do I make sense of this file, right? So this is also something that we were looking at. We're also looking at something in the areas of spot bidding, wherein again, agentic sort of not just augment, maybe take a decision as well, execute it as well. So some of the use cases that we're thinking at, and of course, the number of use cases pretty much sort of increases on a day-by-day basis, right? So again, like I said, it's not really a demo, but it's just a, grab of screenshots. But I have one particular slide wherein I'm also looking at what's the information that's coming into OTM, right? Because obviously in an RIQ, I really sort of I don't want to show a screenshot of what's there. So if you see here, right, this is a customer request. Please share the estimated cost moving 20 pallets from Warsaw to Krakow. Information pickup needs to be delivered in 3 days, right? So one of the things that we also did when we first initially conceptualized this, we just responded with this portion of the email, right? So it's accurate. There's nothing particularly wrong in this. But then when we were doing an internal review, somebody asked a question, right? If somebody is sending me, maybe 20 requests in a month, how do I ensure that I'm responding to the right one? It's a very good point, right? Otherwise, you sort of then asking somebody again to manually look through 20 emails to what we maybe responded last week back. So then we got the idea, okay, we'll attach the initial request back when we respond to the email. So anybody who's asking this question, if they want to go back, look back a week in time, they can also say, okay, I requested this and this is the response that I got. And this is sort of where you can really enhance and add value here, because in the end, what we're pulling out and what we're giving back, that's entirely in our hands, right? So that's where we're doing all our data processing. What is the information that we can pass back to them? So there are options here as to what else we can do to enhance this. So again, and if you see the tone, the language, that's sort of intentionally done. Some of it is just, hey, current status. There's no more information, right? It just says, can you just tell me what's going on here? Here again, we have the option. This we can tailor completely. This is entirely up to us. How detailed we want it. Do we want to summarize it? Do we don't want to give this much of information? This is something that we can completely do by ourselves, depending on the results that we want, right? So again, this is an example wherein we got, it should say actually order pickup. Pick up 33 YOLO pallets from our warehouse, that's it. Right? And this is the examples wherein a lot of time is wasted because there's not enough information. Somebody has to look at it, maybe type it out. Maybe by experience, they'll be able to call it out saying, hey, not enough information. But this is where sort of the automation is there, where we said, look, we're not able to create this order for you because some of this information is missing. And we're telling them, resend the email with the missing value. We're attaching their original request so that they know what exactly are we telling them to adjust, right? So this is also, while sort of we focused a lot initially on the positive use cases, but these were examples wherein, the feedback that we got is, hey, what about negative use cases? And this is sort of when we started to go down that path saying, look, this is information. Some of the things that, the example that we talked about, question mark, ID number, right? That's probably somewhere where we still have a few challenges, probably need to train it a little bit more, because there it's difficult to understand context there because it doesn't say anything more than that. Most likely it's a request for a status update, most likely. But there's probably some work that needs to be done there to probably understand, because it may be a request for, has this shipment order been planned, or it could be complete status update of the entire shipment. So that's where some more of the context work that needs to happen. Now, one of the questions that also came up is that, is it just very superficial in nature in the sense that you're just pulling up information, sending it back, right? So the next example, and this is where we'll probably see screenshots of this, right? So this is a little bit more detailed. So we're talking about picking up an order. We are giving specific shipping instructions. We're giving dates. And then we're also saying, okay, we've created your order. This is your order ID. This is the reference. And this is where the prompt engineering piece becomes even more relevant, because we've got context, we've got additional information, and we also then need to call the right API and place all of this information in the right fields when we are sending this into OTM. And that's what we'll see next here, right? So if you see here, this is the same example that we spoke about. Now, if you see here, the reason we put it as pending review, obviously we don't want to, somebody to immediately pick it up because this is an automation process. We don't want to necessarily somebody come into this and start planning right away. So we just put it as pending review, configurable. If you see here, the instruction that's there on the email, right, is there. So the information is being passed on in a shipping instruction field saying that, look, you've got to prepare the physical CMR and hand it off to the driver. So if you notice in the old email, it said you can't be co-mixed. You need to pick it up on the 25th. You need to deliver in, I think it said 8 days. So that's roughly that. Co-mingle. So we said put it into a full truck, right? So all of this is the additional value add, which is somebody keying in this, is somebody putting this into an Excel and running it, a macro to upload this into OTM. There's no user intervention here at all. So the email just came. And of course, we don't want it to go completely through the system. So that's why we put the order in a pending review status so that somebody can still come and take a look at it. Is it valid? Is this something that needs to be done? Any problems with this? But at least it enormous benefits in terms of productivity, right? I mean, you can definitely look at the hours that are going to be saved, especially if you're in an environment wherein, there's somebody responding via email to a lot of things. And again, this is just, the idea is just to seed the thought. How do we now extend this to other areas? Because if you can do this, there's probably other areas I'm sure that all of you are working with, wherein there's probably a lot of manual work that's needed. And this is easily an option wherein you can look at from a AI perspective. We also added some additional information because the email is not available to the person who's doing the planning. So we put all of that information in remarks saying that, hey, no co-loading allowed. And we actually just copied the entire email here so that whoever is planning also has that information. So again, we don't want them to go and open another email to look. So again, the sky is the limit, just depends on what you can imagine, right? So as we continue to work on this, we want to look at as many use cases as there are possible, and eventually, hopefully, when we're here the next year, you'll probably see somebody as a customer who's already implemented this. Now, from a business value perspective, the manual processing, and again, why maybe we're focusing a little bit on manual processing, maybe too much, but this is sort of where we started off with, right? Diagnostics, that's something anyway Oracle has also mentioned that they're working on. From a productivity standpoint, and again, the main thing is the seamless integration of unstructured data into easily understandable OTM format. And of course, this is by default designed for very large volumes. So if you've got scale, you can still work with it, not a problem. There's sort of no additional work that needs to be done. Some of the things that we are probably looking at is, while we originally started off, we are using the Cohere LLM, and we did the initial bit of the data processing piece on Python, but now we'll probably all move it, not probably, we are already moving everything to OCI, because there are a lot of tools available there that support a lot of these API calls and sort of keeps everything within Oracle as well, which makes it much easier to maintain. So those are sort of some of the things that we're looking at, and hopefully, you will see more from us in terms of these use cases, and maybe we'll have some webinars fairly soon.